Beruchim haboim, welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph at the new Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses whether a person has to daven Musaf as a Yachid. Musaf we know is davened on Shabbos, on Rosh Chodesh, and on Yomim Tovim. Says our Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Omer, Ein Tfilas HaMusafin Ela Bechover Ir. Musaf is only daven with the tzibur. Chever Ir is referring to a tzibur. When there's a minyan, then tfilas musaf is daven. If a person is b'yichidus, he's yachid, he doesn't daven the tfilas musaf. V'chacham oimim b'chever Ir v'shelo b'chever Ir. V'chacham say whether he is in a minyan or he's davening alone b'yichidus, he still davens musaf. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmoi. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Elazar ben Azariah a different version of what he had said. Kol makom sheyesh sham chever ir yochi potter mitfilas hamusafin. When there's a chever ir, he's potter from musaf. The yochi does not daven musaf when there is a minyan, when there's a tzibur. Ask the Gemara right away. Rabbi Yehuda hainu tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda, who's saying a different version of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, is really of the same opinion. Because Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, the way we have it, says that a Yachid doesn't say Musaf. And Rabbi Yehuda says when there's a Tzibur, a Yachid doesn't say Musaf. So what's the difference between the two opinions? Ask the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda hainu tanakama. Answers the Gemara, Ika benayu, Yachid shaloi bechever ir. A Yachid who is not with a Chever Ir. Tanakama Sover Potter. He doesn't have to daven because the tefillah of Musaf is only with a Chever Ir, only with a Tzibur. Rabbi Yehuda Sover Chayi. Rabbi Yehuda says when there is a Chever Ir that is davening Musaf, then the Yachid is Potter. But if there's no Chever Ir, then the Yachid must daven Musaf. Amar Rav Huna bar Chinana. Amar Rav Chia bar Rav halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda she'amar mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The halacha is indeed like that which Rabbi Yehuda said in his version of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that a yachid is potter when there's a minyan davening musaf, but when there's no minyan davening musaf, then the yachid must daven musaf. Amar Rav Chia bar Avin shapir ka'amris. It's good what you had said. It's correct what you said. The Omar Shmuel, for Shmuel himself said, Miyomai lematzilna telusa de musafin b'yachid. All of my days I never daven musaf as a yachid. B'neherdo, in the city of Neherdo. Lebar me'ahu yoimo, the osa pulmusa de malka lamato. Except for that one day when the soldiers came to the city. Ve'atridu rabbanon v'lotzolu. And they disturbed the Rabbanon, they didn't daven together Musaf. V'tzoli li b'yachid. And I davened Musaf alone. V'hava yachid shelo bechover ir. And therefore I was like a yachid who didn't have a chever ir. Since there was no chever ir, there's no tzibur davening Musaf, I davened Musaf as a yachid. So we see the halach is indeed, like Rabbi Yehuda said, b'shem Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Yosef Rav Chanina Kara. Rabbi Chanina, who was called Kara because of his great bikiyus and diktuk in Mikra. He was Kamei de Rabbi Yonai v'Yosef v'Kamar Halacha Rabbi Yehuda Shomer B'Shem Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. He sat before Rabbi Yonai and he said the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Omar Leis Rabbi Yonai said Puk Kra Karech Livro. Go out and read your psukim outside the Beis HaMedrash, which is dealing here in halacha. De'ein halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda shomer b'shum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Because the halacha is not like you say it is. It is not like Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Omar le Rabbi Yirmiyahu le Rabbi Zira v'dilma mi'ikara. Omar Rabbi Yochanan ani ra'isi as Rabbi Yonai. I saw, says Rabbi Yochanan, that Rabbi Yonai davened, and then he davened a second time. So even though Rabbi Yonai had said the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, But what is the halacha? Is it like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, or is it like the Chachamim? Says the Gemara that Rabbi Yochanan had witnessed Rabbi Yonah himself davening 2 Shemona Esreis, one after the next. Omar le Rabbi Yirmiyahu le Rabbi Zira v'dilma mi'ikora lo kivein daite u'levasav kivein daite. Maybe there's no raya from Rabbi Yochanan saw Rabbi Yonah davening 2 Shemona Esreis as a yachid, that he said that a yachid held that a yachid has to daven musaf. And therefore, he holds like the Chachamim. Whether there's a tzibor, it's not a tzibor, a yachid has to daven Shmona Esrei of a musaf. Maybe there's no proof for what Rabbi Yonah did by davening 2 Shmona Esreis, because maybe he made a mistake in the first Shmona Esrei, and he repeated the Shmona Esrei again. In other words, if a person doesn't daven with the kavanah, the proper kavanah in the first bracha, so then he has to be chayzer in his Shmona Esrei. Nowadays, we're concerned that he will not daven a second time with the proper kavanah, so he's not chayzer. But before, they would be chayzer and daven a second Shmona Esrei. So maybe that's exactly what happened. And the reason why he didn't do so right away, and therefore it would have been obvious that he only davened very short and then repeated it in order to then fix up the first Shmona Esrei, is because he only realized after Shmona Esrei, when he realized that he didn't properly have kavanah for the first bracha, then he davened a second Shmona Esrei. So once again, Rabbi Yochanan witnesses Rabbi Yonah davening 2 times, which seems to be a proof that indeed he holds that a yachid has to daven musaf. He daven shacharit and then he daven musaf. Ask the Gemara, maybe that's not so. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Yonah davened twice is because he made a mistake the first time, but it's really 2 shacharis. Says the Gemara, Omar le chazi man gavra rabba tikmasadid alei. Look, who is the great man, referring to Rabbi Yochanan, who is giving testimony that Rabbi Yonah daven shacharis and then musaf. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan was astute, and therefore he paid attention to that which Rabbi Yonah did. If he said Rabbi Yonah daven twice as a yachid, implying that he daven shacharis and then musaf, it's because he knows what he's talking about. Rabbi Asi, says the Gemara right there, even though they had 13 shuls b'Tiveria, in the city of Tiveria where they lived, lo havu matzlu ela beinei amudei, they wouldn't daven in those shuls other than in their own base medrash where they learned heiche dahavu garsi, and therefore when they davened, they would daven also as a yachid. And therefore, when they daven, they also daven musaf. So we see indeed that the halacha is like the chachamim, that a person who is a yachid without the sibur will also have to daven musaf. Says the Gemara, Itmar, Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi mishum Rabbeinu, referring to Rav, Omar halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda she'omar mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And he says the halacha ultimately is like what Rabbi Yehuda said, named Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and therefore a yachid does not have to daven musaf, only the tzibur davens musaf. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chia bar Abi tzali v'hoder tzali. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, he davened, and then he repeated and davened again. Omar Reb Zira, my taima ovid mar hochi. Why did you do such a thing? Why did you daven a second time? If it's because you didn't have the proper kavanah the first time, like we said, a person needs to have kavanah at least as a minimum for the first bracha of Shmona Esrei, and if he doesn't, then it has to be chayzer. So maybe you didn't have proper the kavanah the first time. Why not? V'hamar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, "La'olam yamud adam es atzmo." A person should measure himself. Im yachal lechavein es libo yispalel, v'im lav al yispalel. If a person will have the capacity to daven with kavana, then he should daven. But if he already can anticipate he cannot daven with kavana, at least the first bracha with kavana, then he shouldn't daven. Ella deloyitka mar dereish yarcha. Rather, it must be that mar, the reason why you daven a second time is because you forgot to mention ya'aleh v'yavo the first time. V'hatanya, it says in the Brisa, Tov v'lo yizkir shorosh chodesh, Ba'arvis ein machzirin oisoy, b'mnei sheyachal la'omer b'shacharis. We'll go with this girsa, that if a person didn't say Ya'aleh v'yova ba'arvis, then he can mention it in the morning, therefore it doesn't go back. He doesn't go back if he misses it in Shachris because he's able to then say it in Musaf and be Mazkir Rosh Chodesh on Musaf. And if he misses Musaf and he begins saying Atachonin la'odam das, then he can still make it up at Mincha when he davens Mincha Shmona Esrei, mention Ya'aleh V'Yovo then. Omar lei lav itmar Allah, is it not stated on this the following, that the Bryce was taught Amar Rav Yochanan b'tzibur shanu. We're talking about a tzibur over here. And therefore when a person is going to hear from the shliach tzibur, he's going to hear the haskara of Ya'aleh V'Yovo, that's good enough. Some others learn that the person, the shliach tzibur himself, if he makes a mistake and he completes the Shmona Esrei, he doesn't go back because it's a tircha de tziburo, and therefore he can rely on the next Shmona Esrei. Says our Gemara, Kama yisha bein tefillah letefillah. Once we say that there is a tefillah of shacharis and a tefillah of musaf, how much time does he wait in between the two tefillos? In other words, what is the minimum amount of time that a person can wait between two tefillos that he makes? Either in case of this case of shacharis and the musaf, or even in a case where he made a mistake and he had to then repeat the first Shmona Esrei, how much time can he wait as a minimum time before davening the second Shmona Esrei? Says the Gemara, Rav Huna of Rav Chizda, there's a machlokes, l'chora. Chad amar mekidei shetischoinen daitoi alav, v'chad amar kidei shetischoilel daitoi alav. The first opinion says, kidei shetischoinen daitoi alav, he has to then miyashiv his das so they can daven with techina, with supplication. And the other says he has to miyashiv his das so he can mitchoilel, which means he should be able to implore Hashem with his tefillah. The truth is, it's not a machlokes. They're both saying really the same shiur, but just a difference in terms of how to then get to that in the Lashonos. But the shiur is a minimum of Daled Amos, which comes out to be about 2.5 seconds. Man da Omar Kidei shetischoinen Daitoi alov, dichsiv, he has a posuk, ve'eschanein el Hashem, and I will be mischanein before Hashem in tefillah. Uman domar kidei shetischoilel daitoi alov, dichsiv vayochel Moshe, and Moshe implored. So both different versions of tefillah, different aspects, different ways of expressing tefillah, but again, they're both saying the same thing, that you have to wait a shiur of Daled Amos. Amar Rav Anan, Amar Rav Tov, Elo Hizkir Shal Rosh Chodesh Arvis, Ein Machzirin Oisoi. If a person did not say Ya'aleh V'Yovo at night in the Shmona Esrei, he does not repeat the Shmona Esrei as he would normally in other times when he does not say Ya'aleh V'Yovo. In the Shacharis and the Mincha of Rosh Chodesh, as well as the Mo'adim, if he did not say Ya'aleh V'Yovo. Why? Why when it comes to Arvis on Rosh Chodesh, if he did not say, he does not repeat? Since Beis Din is not Mekadesh the Chodesh only during the day, therefore if a person did not say the Ya'aleh V'Yovo at night, then he will not repeat the Shmona Esrei because again, Beis Din is not Mekadesh the Yom, the Chodesh at night. Omra Meimar Mistabra Milso de Rav B'Chodesh Molei. It's mistaber that a person will not have to be choizer his Shmona Esrei at night if it's a Chodesh Molei, when it's a Chodesh Molei of 30 days and there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. Therefore, if he missed it the first night, he can go ahead and say the Ya'aleh V'Yovo, which is the Iker day of Rosh Chodesh, it's Aleph of the next month, the next night. But if it was only a Chodesh Choser, where there's only 1 day Rosh Chodesh, and he missed it that night, then he would have to be Choser. Says the Gemara, Malei Rav Ashi la Meimar, Michdi Rav Taimakar. Rav said a reason behind what he had said. And he said the reason why you're not Choser for not saying Ya'aleh V'Yovo at night is not because Choser or Sholem. Mali Choser, Mali Mali. It doesn't make a difference. He says because we're not Mekadesh the Chodesh at night. Hadron Aloch Tfilas Hashachar. Be'ezer Hashem, we begin the 5th parak, which is also discussing Shmona Esrei Tefillah. Here our Mishnah discusses Kavanas Halev B'Tefillah. Says our Mishnah, Ein oimdin lihispalel ela mitoich koived rosh. A person does not stand Shmona Esrei except with what's called koved rosh, the opposite of kalus rosh. Koved rosh refers to over here where a person has marei shomayim, that he realizes he's standing before the Melech Malchei Hamlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he has hachana, submissiveness, humility. Chasidim harishonim hayu shoyim sha'achas umispallim kedei sheychavnu libam la'avim shebashomayim. The early Rishonim, the early Chasidim, they used to wait an entire hour, and they would think during that hour before davening at the limitations of man, their personal deficiencies, and the greatness and the shleimus and perfection of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they would ponder that for the entire hour so that they were then able to then direct their hearts to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Tefillah. Afilu, says the Mishnah right there, Afilu HaMelech Shel B'Shlomo Lo Yishkevenu. Even though we said previously that in regards to Kriya Shema, a person can make certain interruptions, he says over here by Tefillah, here since he's standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Tefillah, even if a Melech, talking about a Melech Yisrael, who comes and asks him how he is doing, he's not to respond. I say Melech Yisrael because if his life is endangered, if it's a Melech of an Akum, of Oivdei Kaichovim, who would kill him as a result of not responding to him, then he's allowed to interrupt Pikuach Nefesh. And says the Mishnah, Va'afilu nochosh karuch al akevoi lo yafsik. Even if a snake is wrapped around his leg, and again, it's not talking about a snake that would kill him, because that would be a situation of Pikuach Nefesh. He would be able to save his life and interrupt the Shmona Esrei. Here we're talking about where he's not dangerous. It could be that he might bite him, but he will not be dangerous, and therefore he's not allowed to interrupt. He could, however, walk in order to then cause the Nachash to then go away from him, but he cannot interrupt with Dibur. Says the Gemara, from where do we know these words of Ein oimdim lihispalel ela mitoich koived rosh? What is the source for this? Says the Gemara, Amrei Elazar de Amar Kra, v'hi maras nefesh. Here it's referring to Chana davening, and it says in the pasuk in her tefillah that she was maras nefesh. That means because of her maras nefesh, her embittered nefesh, therefore she had hachana and davened to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with submissiveness and humiliation. Says the Gemara, Mimai, from where can you learn that this is a source for everybody else? Dilma Chana shiny. Maybe Chana is different. The Havas Maria Liba Ntuva, because her heart was very, very much embittered for the fact that she didn't have any children. And therefore, she davened with such a moras nefesh, but that's not necessarily a way that everybody else needs to daven. Elom Rav Yosi Rav Chanina mehocha. From here, it's in the pasuk Va'ani berov chasdecho avo veisecho eshtachavel heichal kodshecho biyirasecho. David HaMelech says, I, in your great kindliness, come to your house and I prostrate myself to your heichal, your holy heichal, biyirasecha, in your yira. Ask the Gemara, Mimai, how can this be a proof for everybody else? Dilma David shiny. The Hava Mitzar Nafshe Beracha Meituva. David was unique in the fact that David, he was Mitzar himself to daven in such a way. Therefore, that was unique to David, but who says that for everybody else? Elam Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi mehocha. Hishtachavu lo Hashem behadras kodesh. You shall prostrate yourself to Hashem with holy splendor. Al tikre bahadras, with splendor, elo bechedras, but rather with trembling. Memai, ask the Gemara, how do you see that this is a proof for everybody else? Dilma la'olam ema lecha hadras mamish. Maybe the pasuk just means what it says, lehadras kodesh. When a person davens HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it should be with splendor. Ki hoder Rav Yehuda have a mitzayin nafshe v'hoder matzli. He would adorn himself with good, proper garments that were clean and respectful before the king, before he would then daven the Shmona Esrei. From the following verse to teach us, Ein oimdim liispalel ela mitoch koved roish. The pasuk says, Ivdu es Hashem biyira v'gil beroda. A person should be oived es Hashem biyira, and it says that a person should be oived b'chol levavoi, with all of his heart. Zu tefillah is referring to tefillah, and therefore, when a person does so, it should be with Mara Shamayim. That's our source. Ask the Gemara on the latter part of this previous verse. The word says Vegila Bira'oda. My Vegi'ilu Bira'oda. It seems to be a contradiction. Gilu means simcha. Bira'oda means with trembling. So how do the two things go together? Rav Ada bar Masna Amarove. Amarabba. B'makom Gila Shom Tehei Ra'oda. In a place where there is joy and simcha, it should be tempered with ra'oda. It shouldn't get out of hand. Abai have a Yosef kamei de Rabbe. Abai was sitting before Rabba. Chaz yedahave kabodach tuva. Rabba saw that Abaye was overly joyful in an excessive type of way. Omar, he said to him, Vigilu bera'oda ksiv. It says that one's joy should be tempered with ra'oda, with trembling. Omar le ana tefillin manachna. Abaye said, I put on tefillin today. In other words, that Abaye was so joyful, he hadn't put on tefillin for several days. Today he put on tefillin, and therefore he had such a rejoicing in the fact that he was able to mekayim the mitzvah of tefillin that day. And therefore, because it's a mitzvah, a simcha shel mitzvah, there's not a concern that his simcha will get out of hand and be turned into the wrong direction. Rabbi Yirmiyahu have a Yosef kamei de Rabbi Zira, a similar meiser. Rabbi Yirmiyahu this time was sitting before Rabbi Zira. Chazi yedahave kabodach tuva, and Rabbi Zira saw that Rabbi Yirmiyahu was with an extra type of joy that was a little bit excessive. Omar le, he said to him, Bechol etzev ye moisar ksiv. The pasuk says that when there is a degree of sadness, then that is an advantage. Meaning to say, not sadness, a person should be sad because that's cholei haguf. Rather, a degree of sadness whereby it's tempering his joy that is not getting out of hand. Omar le, ana tefillin manachna. I put on tefillin today, and therefore my joy of tefillin, it's a simcha shel mitzvah, will now allow my joy to get out of hand, and therefore the mara of the tefillin that I'm wearing will temper that joy.